All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Devesh Divedi from entrepreneurinmaking.com, and today I have a very special guest. I have David Siteman Garland, the mastermind behind the number one non-boring resource for building your business, and I love that tagline: smarter, faster, and cheaper. David, welcome to the video, and thanks a lot for giving us your time.
Hey, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for the intro. It's always good to talk to another D who's talking entrepreneurship. So that always works for me. Thanks for having me on.
Great, great. So I mean, I follow your show. I love it, and I know all about you. I mean, as much as is public, of course. But why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about you? What do you do, your show, your blog, and how it all started?
Sure. So, yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the public thing, and I'm a big believer in kind of doing transparent business. So I try to put a lot of stuff out there. You know, I don't even know if I have a private life. Who knows? But here's the thing. So the Rise to the Top was an idea that was born in a coffee shop. I had done marketing for a hockey league. That was my first entrepreneurial venture right out of college. So I had this experience of doing marketing and promoting, no idea what I was doing. No idea what I was doing for this niche hockey league, and I learned that you didn't need a big budget to do all this kind of stuff, like contrary to popular belief, that you needed some kind of massive budget to market and promote a business, a product, or service, whatever it may be. And I was fascinated by these stories that I would hear from people that were sharing like smarter, faster, cheaper ways of marketing and promoting, and also entrepreneurship and all these other kinds of things. And I said, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could sit down with the most unique, interesting people and get to pick their brain in front of, and build up an audience and community to get, not fluffy theory and garbage that you hear all the time, but real stories from people that are doing things smarter, faster, cheaper that can inspire the rest of us. So it started in 2008 actually as a local television show, and that's a whole nother story there, that I produced. I had to shoot half of it out of my condo in St. Louis, Missouri until my fiance kicked us out. We had to do everything to hustle. We did events in St. Louis, but fast forward 2 years later, we're now primarily web-based. It's led to a book deal, and we went from 0 to 100,000 viewers a month in about 2 years, and went into the six figures in revenue pretty quickly. So that's the super snapshot story of what the Rise to the Top is. So it's a resource, articles, videos for forward thinkers, entrepreneurs, all kinds of stuff like that.
Wow, and that right there is in its own self rise to the top story by itself, eh? And next question, and this video specifically is focused for Gen Ys, people your and I age and whatnot. Do you think that your age or you being young ever came in your way or actually helped you? It could be the ways, either helped you or actually hindered your way to success. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been invited to speak a few times to older groups, right? Like Gen X and baby boomers, to talk about like Gen Y, and they always kind of look at us like these little aliens, like the ADD text messaging, shiny red balls syndrome, fast talking like me, crazy people. And what I've noticed though, actually, was that being Gen Y was a massive advantage in most ways, okay? Number one is when you're an entrepreneur or you're starting something and you're younger, okay? And I'm not saying, only young people can start companies, not true, but people are more willing to help that are more experienced. Yeah. So, for example, they kind of see it as, older, more veteran entrepreneurs, mentors, people like that. They're much more likely to love to hear from a young, ambitious, passionate person as opposed to someone else that wants to pick their brain for a little minute. So you can get access to things that maybe that you wouldn't if you were older. And I noticed that was key for me, just getting in, when I was starting a company, I would call everyone I knew, I mean literally, and say, hey, I'm doing this. What do you think about it? Is it terrible? Is it good? Can I ask you a few questions about it? And I feel like my age at that point was a massive advantage, because if I was older, people would be like, oh yeah, I'll give you my opinion for $10,000 consulting fee or whatever. So being young was an advantage. The other thing is, I think that we are wired, Gen Y, we grew up with the internet. Essentially. And we grew up with this technology. And I'm not talking about mastering it and being a complete tech geek. I mean, if you are, that's awesome. That's even a bigger advantage. But for the most case, we have a big leg up on the rest of the world that I think people are very much underestimating. I mean, if you look at Gen X and boomers are trying to understand what we're doing online, like what is this interview, and this isn't everyone, but I'm generalizing, of course, but people, the technology is to our advantage. And I think that's a massive thing. And the third thing I want to say is that also, I wouldn't call it a disadvantage, but I would say that respecting other generations is something that we also need to do better as Gen Y. Meaning, like, we don't have all the answers. There's people that have had all kinds of incredible experience. Maybe we do it in a different way, but I think also respecting the elders, if you will, is something that I think, can't really be forgotten there.
Yeah, yeah. Now, it's funny you just mentioned about the stereotypes and criticism that Gen X and baby boomers have about Gen Ys, that we Gen Yers have unrealistic expectations when it comes to money or career or success, or we are the Facebook generation, we are spoon-fed, we have everything that that we could have asked for, and that's why we are kind of spoiled, or we don't know what we are doing. We are unproductive, whatever. What and how do you handle these stereotypes in your career if you ever came across them? And what would you say about these stereotypes? And I know you touched upon it in the last question, but I would love to specifically talk about the stereotypes because, of course, this video is definitely focused to help Gen Yers.
Right, and here's the, what I'd love to say is I just take the stereotypes and just punch them right in the face. But what's interesting about it is, stereotypes in many cases exist for a reason, right? Because they're saying that people, it's easy to compartmentalize people and say this is how they think. And we could say the same thing, that, boomers are slow moving, they hate change, and they're scared of the internet, and they don't understand Facebook, and they're old and annoying. Okay, we can make the same generalizations. And what I think with stereotypes, I've noticed them not necessarily to be true. And here's what I mean by that, is that while Gen Y might be different than Gen X, and that might be different than boomers, what I've noticed personally is that I feel like a lot of people are generation shifting. So do you know what I'm saying? Like where, for example, someone's 75, but they always say they act young. And there's also people that are 18 that act like they're 100. And what I'm thinking is that it's more of a mentality, right? I mean, you could be spoiled and ADD and ridiculous and be 80, and you could be an old soul at 26, 27, 28, whatever it may be. So what I've noticed, as opposed to perpetuating those stereotypes, is just, being yourself with it, and good business, whether you're Gen Y, an entrepreneur looking for a job or whatever it may be, don't worry about the stereotypes. Let your actions speak. And I think that's the biggest thing that you can do as a Gen Yer, less talk like we're doing now, honestly, and more and more action. Doing something in the world is going to be the things that shut up the people about stereotypes.
Okay, perfect. Now, just a quick question. Did you ever come across any such criticism in your career so far?
You know what? And I'm sure I have, and I think it's one of those interesting things. And I feel like, anyone, when you're an entrepreneur, of course, you're going to get, it's your baby. So anytime you get criticized, even though you have to put it to the side, I got to say, though, I cannot think of a single incidence where someone said, you can't do this, you're too young, whatever it may be. Now, if they did do that, it would just motivate me much more to do that, And I think, we have a local business journal in St. Louis. It's like a local business magazine, and they were mad at me at one point because they felt like we were taking advertisers and things like that, which best of luck to them. But the idea is, I didn't know if that was based on the business model or that I was just kind of an up-and-comer. But, to me, it just really hasn't happened, which I wish it has. That'd have a better story.
Do you think there is any element of fear in Generation X or baby boomers because, as even your book says, smarter, faster, cheaper, because of the internet, because of the technology that is available to Gen Y, we of course are smarter, faster, and cheaper because we leverage upon technology. So do you think Gen X or baby boomers have an element of fear, and that's why they have come up with these stereotypes? And
that's an interesting question, and us of them as well. I think people in general, I mean, have problems with change, right? And I think like when we're all 75 and 80, we're going to look back at those 20-year-olds and say, what's wrong with them? What are they doing?
Yeah.
You know, who knows what they're going to do? And I guarantee you, I'll be the first old man sitting there with a cane, you know, shaking it at people. But, you know, I think there is an element of fear because I think the world is changing so much. Communication is changing so much. The internet is something that I know we all know it so well, but it's so underrated, like how we're using it. And you know, also private versus public is a massive thing. You know, when I first started speaking and getting out there and doing a lot of speaking things, you know, a lot of people asked me to come in and talk about social media and things like that and kind of new media and whatever. And an interesting thing, people always said, "Oh, I don't want myself on the internet. I don't want myself out there." But there was never a Gen Yer that said something like that, ever, ever. And I'm sure there are that think that, but it's definitely this. The world's becoming more public, privacy is becoming less, opportunities are becoming more, and kind of the old guard of media and communications is being broken down. And honestly, I can see how that would be scary. I can see how that would be scary, you know?
Yeah. I guess, wasn't it Facebook CEO and founder Mark Zuckerberg who said default is the new privacy, there is no such thing as privacy or something like that?
He said, you know what he said? I remember that quote exactly. He said social is the new default. Right?
Oh, okay.
He said social is the new default, and I think that's exactly what I was saying. And I'm not saying that we've gotten to that point yet where it is, but we're certainly going that way, where things are shared more openly. I mean, think about it. Even a few years ago, if I wanted to share an interesting article with you, I'd have to cut it out of the paper. I'd copy it because I want to keep a copy for myself on some copier, fold it up, put it in a mailbox and send it to you. And then what would happen? You'd read it and throw it away. I mean, my grandma still does that to me. But the idea being that the way that information spreads is so different right now, and I think that creates a tremendous opportunity, honestly.
Perfect. Now, I would love to close the interview, but before that, two things. What would be your top suggestions for GenYs? What should they be doing right now? And any of your parting advice, comments, suggestions, whatever you want to share with us.
Sure. So there's a lot of things GenY can be doing, obviously, all generations. But specifically for us, this is what I think is number one important. Besides doing, right, which I mentioned before, getting out there, doing something. I mean, you don't need permission to do anything. I mean, you could start a blog tomorrow. You could start something using these tools that make it inexpensive to get going, you know? And the key thing that I think that we really need to understand, and older generations know this, and I think we need to highlight it because the technology is now an advantage, is this. Relationships, okay? Everything in business and life is focused on relationships. Who you know, who knows you, and in what way, right? And I'm not talking about swarmy networking or sketchy schmoozing. I'm talking about actual genuine relationships, okay? And here's the thing. They happen online and offline. There's no online relationships and offline relationships anymore. They are bridging together. And what I've noticed is the people that have success, and I don't care if you're looking for a job, starting your own company, whatever it is that you may do, it is based on your network and your relationships. And my number one piece of advice is start building those relationships yesterday, right now. The people that you can connect with, interesting people that you find, creative people, who knows who it may be. Because here's the thing. At some point, you're going to need your network for something. You're going to need it for something. Maybe you've launched something. Maybe you have something coming out. Maybe you need something. Whatever it may be. And the ones that are successful have built it and given a lot first. And then when they need it, the network is there for them. And that would be my number one piece of advice if to take away for GenY.
Perfect. Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, this was David Siteman Garland. You can find more about him at smarterfastercheaper.com and pre-order his book. His book is out in December. Pre-order his book at smarterfastercheaper.com, and you can always go to his blog, which is at therisetothetop.com. David, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. I hope they pick up 20 or 100 books too. That sounds good. Well, thanks so much for having me on.
Great, thanks.